Greetings and welcome to the ROI Clear podcast. My name is Ray Hightower, and today we are fortunate to have as our guest Mr. Steve Scanlon. Steve Scanlon is the founder and CEO of Rewire Inc. He has founded other companies as well. We look forward to getting into those. He is a speaker, a coach, and a published author, and we're going to dig into a lot of what he's doing, including some work that he has done with the lizard brain. So we're going to ask him about that at some point. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our guest, Mr. Steve Scanlon. Welcome, Steve.
Great to be with you, Ray. Thanks for having me.
Great. Yeah, glad to have you here as well. You have a remarkable experience in business and leadership, and we want to dig into that. To kick things off, why don't we start with an elevator pitch? And for those who are new to the ROI Clear podcast, Steve is on an elevator with someone he wants to influence. What would you say to that person in the course of an elevator ride?
Well, am I in the Sears Tower or a two-bedroom condominium? Like, where am I? How long do I get?
Let's say you're on in a condominium building with 16 floors, not the Sears Tower. So you have a little bit of a limit, but you're not going to be able to talk for the next 30 minutes because we're going to ask you questions too.
Well, and my job is to influence them. Is that what I'm doing?
Yes, influence would be good. Influence or appeal to them somehow.
Well, I think I wouldn't think about all, maybe some of the things that I do and say I would ask questions about them. I would ask what they're interested in. I would ask maybe about not just what they do, but why they do it. I like to get to people's purposes as soon as I can, because I guess I've learned that, and I forget the saying, it's one of those trite sayings that people said, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suppose if I was going to have influence on someone, I wouldn't think of all of the things that I've done that I might blithely think is interesting, but I'd rather try to be interested in them and really learn about what their story is and where they go and who they are and what they do and why they do it.
Wow. That tells me that you are intellectually curious. You're curious about people.
Yeah, I don't know how you do the work that I do. Well, I do know how you do it, but curiosity, I believe, is a soft skill that can be fostered, can be curated, and probably one that's maybe underdone in our culture. So yeah, it's pretty human to, just from a survival perspective, to go around and think about ourselves and think about my interests and my stuff. And so I hope to meet people, and certainly when I do the work that I do, curiosity, without which I think we just pretty much get self-centered and think about our story.
Sure. Now, you're an executive coach in addition to being an author and a business leader. Tell us about the executive coaching part of your, or the executive coaching hat of your many hats.
Yeah, well, coaching is by now, I think a lot of your listeners will have known about executive coaching. And you say executive coaching, that's one of the interesting things I think about coaching in general is over the last handful of years, it's become fairly democratized. It's highly unregulated. So whereas someone in the United States or really all around the world it'd be pretty difficult, Ray, for you to wake up and go, I want to be a dentist today. Well, you can't do that in our world, and you can't be a doctor, and you can't be a lawyer, and you can't do certain trades without licenses, but you can still be a coach. And so coaching has invited a lot of people that love the idea of helping other people, and I think it's really beautiful. In other ways, a lot of people have taken it, and you hear about life coaching, and you hear about executive coaching and leadership coaching and this and that. And it's really blossomed into all of these, various forms. And because of really my interest in, we have now, 16, 17 coaches in our organization. All of us have a passion in neuroscience that probably stem from the early goings of Rewire, about how we rewire how we think. And so we've created our own flavor of coaching called mindset coaching, with the idea of, if coaching is primarily about helping someone achieve a result or achieve a goal, goals are often a gap between what you currently have and what you want. And if we're going to achieve that, we serve people and help people get to those goals. There's a lot of different avenues to do that, but executive coaching is, I guess that's a distinction between, like, if I'm on an airplane and I talk about coaching for half of that conversation, I think people think I'm still talking about, 12-year-old kids soccer, like that, and coaching as a business perspective did probably borrow some of its traits from athletics. And so we are in the world and we practice a form of coaching called mindset coaching. We're all certified through the International Coaching Federation and the Neuro Leadership Institute, and we have a lot of other certifications. So we take a fairly academic approach to what the field of coaching actually is.
Wonderful. Let's unpack that a bit, because as you said, there are a lot of people who may call themselves coaching. It sounds like it's a profession where there's a low barrier to entry, but a high barrier to excellence. Like there's some people who can deliver on it and some people who don't necessarily do that, I would imagine.
Yeah, I'm going to take that and steal it and call it my own and give you no credit. That was really good. I got to write that down. That's a low barrier to entry, but a high barrier to excellence.
That's fine. I probably stole that from someone also. So what did Picasso say? Good artists copy, great artists steal. So there we go. So you, sir, are a great artist in addition to being a mindset coach.
Well, I'd have to coach you. You'd be the determiner of that, I suppose. But, I like that Picasso saying. He also said you must first learn the rules like a pro so that you can later break them like an artist.
I like that.
And we actually use that in our coach training because we do, not only am I a coach, but we do a lot of coach training as well. And when you're dealing with human beings, if you go through some of these certifying bodies, there is an academically understood way to do coaching. And you can learn the work as a pro. What it means to break it as an artist is, Ray, you're still dealing with human beings. You can learn all the mechanics. You can learn how to listen. You can learn how to repeat. You can learn how to ask great questions. You can learn all of that. But I believe that eventually when you're working with human beings, you're going to have to learn how to break it like a pro, because not every goal or thought or whatever is mechanical. And so there is an organic nature to it. And I tell people, you can get our certification and go get certified, and day one, someone's going to throw something at you and you're going to go, wait, what?
Yes.
And we have to learn to be curious and open-minded and be willing to seek with people and not pretend like we have all the answers for them.
Got it. Who would you say is your ideal client? Who are you helping through your work?
Yeah, our ideal client, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. Our ideal client is probably first and foremost someone who has a growth mindset, right? And, I'd like to think that, man, the whole world does, and they don't, Ray. There's a lot of people that become fixed in who they are. And by the way, that has nothing to do with age. I guess I've encountered some 20-something-year-olds who are fixed and there's not this interest and curiosity about growing. And I've met some people in their 60s and 70s, which is a really interesting thing, because that saying, you can't teach an old dog.
Yeah, new tricks. Yes.
That is biologically inaccurate now. We understand that, right? But the neurobiology is old dogs absolutely learn new tricks, because neuroplasticity, our brains are always changing. But in order to change for the positive, because you asked me who's our clients, people that want positive change, that know that growth is primarily outside the scope of only something that they can see. And so they search for someone, just like athletes do, right? Golfers, track stars. I mean, I guess if you belong to a team, you're going to get a coach. But why do these individual people go get coaches? Why do tennis players go get coaches? And I think it's primarily, it's not that they don't know how to swing a racket or a club or know how to run or jump. They know that they only have basically a 90, or if they've got good peripheral vision, maybe 120-degree view. They don't have 360. And so
Yes.
having someone in your world that can help you understand and see 360 for the purposes of achieving a goal is crucial. And some of the most, the wealthiest, most talented athletes in the world come to understand I cannot see around me fully. And so they go and find someone that can help them have that kind of vision, because that kind of vision is a more comprehensive way to achieve goals. And so
You know,
we
listening to you, I get excited because I'm thinking of a coach that Michael Jordan hired. This was beyond the coach that he had on the Bulls. This was a separate coach that he had to build him up and get him to that next level. That was Tim Grover that he hired. And he used to say about Tim, number one, he would not introduce any other players in the NBA to Tim Grover because he considered Tim Grover to be a strategic advantage. So he wouldn't share that. He did not introduce Grover to any player until he was about to retire. Then he introduced him to Kobe because Kobe was like his little brother, right?
yeah.
So I'm listening to you. Even Michael Jordan felt that he needed coaching beyond what he was getting as a pro basketball player on the Bulls. And I would imagine there are people who call you and your team for missions like that when they want to go above and beyond. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely. But I have a question for you about that. Can I ask you a question in
Yes,
your interview?
absolutely. Yeah, we'll turn this around. We could even put up your logo and make it your podcast.
No, no, I love that story about Grover. My question for you was, did he call that guy in for technical stuff? Was Michael looking to do something different with his wrist in his jump shots and his whatever? Or did he call that guy in to help him with his mental game and his mindset game?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't know what was the initial catalyst for that. I know he ended up helping him with his mindset big time because Grover talks about that in his books where exercise that he went through with Michael Jordan. Um I need to, you know what, that is enough motivation for me to go back, read one of his books or read both of those books and look for that. I don't recall which it was. That's a really good question.
Yeah.
What do you think
Well,
typically, what do you think would be the typical catalyst?
and again, this is you and I speculating, because we're
Yeah,
not Michael Jordan and we're not there and we can't talk to Grover or whatever. But if
yeah,
you could interview Michael Jordan, and this, I'm asking you to speculate because we don't know the answer to this, but if you
right.
could, you asked him, Michael, when you were in the fourth quarter or the game was whatever, or any aspect of the game, what percentage of the game when you were at the highest level would you assign to technical, I know how to do this and shoot the ball and, do the stuff? And what percent would you assign to mindset? If we could separate those two things into how you think about it and you're processing it and how you actually play it, what do you think he'd say about what percent at that level is technical and the other percent of it is what we call adaptive or mindset? What would you think he'd say?
I think he would have different answers depending on whether you're asking Michael Jordan at age 22 or Michael Jordan at age 50. And at age 50, and probably when he got into his 40s, he would definitely say it's mindset. You could even see it in some of the commercials that he would do, where he would say, hey, where he would tell people that, maybe I made it look like playing basketball was too easy, or maybe you're just making excuses. He was very much about mindset, definitely towards the end of his career, and no doubt now as a businessman, business is all about mindset.
Yeah, there are some technical things. You need to make certain
Yes,
decisions. There are technical things, but I noticed ROI Clear, like a lot of times when people want to measure the return on investment on anything, it's
yes,
interesting how a lot of leaders and people in our world look to the technical things. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and that's fine.
mhm,
And there are some elements that we need to do well. You want the highest of ROI in your business and whatever. It's not, we've got to look past just the technical and go, not just what are you doing, but how are you thinking? And so
right.
Thank you for that. I don't know that it's this or that percentage. And I loved your answer. Depends on who's asking and what the situation. Most of the athletes take golf. I mean, but you could take bowling or tennis.
Oh.
Look at these people and ask the greatest golfers what percentage of their game. Now, do they know how, do they work on their mechanics and do they,
Mhm.
yes. But when they're playing and they're in it, what percentage of that is between their ears? And even the average person on the street would go, what, 90?
Mm.
It's not 100 because we got to still have technical understanding.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
we primarily in our organization help that 90. I don't come into businesses and go, you need to do this and this and this and this. I want to ask about how you're thinking about it, because to a lot of people, Rewire, our company, we are the competitive weapon because of how we're
Mm.
helping people process how they think about stuff and not just telling them what to do.
Got it. You know what? We might need to back up a little bit because you and I have been tossing around a term here, and it just occurred to me we did not define it at the beginning. We just jumped right into it because I think we've well I've read some books to prepare for this interview and to talk to people like you, but the word we've tossed around is mindset, and I was wondering if you could give us a basic definition of the word mindset and how it applies to business, and then we can go from there.
Well, um, remember those? You remember those awkward moments you told me about? Like, I love the question, a basic definition of mindset. It's so interesting to try to create a simplified definition of something that is so profoundly deep, right?
Okay.
And now we've had all these sayings. Let's add another saying. I think it was Einstein that said, any fool can complicate a matter. It takes a genius to make something simple. And
Mm.
so I'm not a genius. And so maybe I'll complicate the matter, but I'll try. Mindset is probably how anybody approaches something in their mind, any problem, any solution, any opportunity. It might differ from the actions that we take. Maybe it's how we consider something
Mm-hmm.
versus how we act on something. And for a long time, interestingly, I've thought the word mindset is interesting because if you pull that word apart, how our mind is set.
Mm.
Michael Jordan and all these people probably hire Grover and all these other people to help them not be so set in their mind. If you're so fixed in how you think about something, it's going to be very difficult for you to approach a problem differently.
Mm.
It's gonna,
Mm-hmm.
if Michael Jordan didn't have a growth mindset, we're using him. How did he grow? Well, it wasn't because he was set in his mind. It was rather because he allowed for flexibility and say, well,
Mm-hmm.
what if I could accomplish this? What if I could do that? What if I could do this? And that was less about being set in our mind, but we've come to term that mindset. I just find it interesting because when you look at the work that we do, I'm actually trying to get the work that we do is trying to help people flex in their mind and not be so set.
Mm-hmm.
If you approach any challenge with your mind being set, we need to overcome the setness of our mind so that we can become more flexible. But I don't know if I defined that very well. It's probably how we think about something and not just act on things.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Wonderful. Wow. There's a lot we could do there. When did you know that you wanted to be a coach?
That's a great question. In my elevator pitch, when I'm not trying to, talk about me, I
Mhm.
have an athletic background. Believe it or not,
Oh,
so my background, I had an athletic background.
what
It's
sport?
it's a weird thing to talk about because it wasn't football or whatever. Believe it or not, I was a springboard diver. And
Excellent.
I was a high school All-American. I was top 20 in the country. I trained at a very high level. I went to the University of Hawaii. I ended up
Mm.
graduating in Virginia. on scholarships, and you can only take diving so far. The only reason I say that is because I was probably a better observer, as I took it to a pretty high level. If you saw me even today, you wouldn't think, ooh, diver, right?
Mm.
Divers are relatively tall and thin, just aesthetically, it's an aesthetic sport. And so I just always found that there were two kinds of athletes, maybe three. There were kinds of athletes that were both given a God-given ability to do something, in my view, and
Mm-hmm.
the desire to pursue improvement.
Mm.
Then there were people like me. I don't know that I was given the ability to do it. I was just super passionate about it, which made me a better coach. I could
Mm.
see it more clearly than I could do it because I understood what it meant to suffer. There were some
Mm-hmm.
people that had the talent, and if you ask them about it, they were. It's looking at Michael Jordan when he was little. It's watching Tiger Woods when he's 5 swing a golf club. That they were given
Yeah.
unbelievable early talent. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't doing that. And so as a result of that, I knew when I was 16, when parents were asking me to look at their kids swim and dive, I was 16 years old. I knew I at some level. And so when I heard about coaching, I guess in the mid 90s, I had owned a couple of companies. I was a national production manager, and I literally within about 2 months quit my jobs, moved my 4 kids and wife to Oregon, and became a coach because I knew from my early days that's what I was really meant to do.
And just as you learned to dive effectively, going through all of the exercises and all of the training there, I'm sure you went through an extensive amount of exercise and training as you grew your 3 companies. And going through that,
There's an incredible amount of parallels between sports life. That's why there's how many countless books, The Inner Game of Tennis, right?
yeah,
Pick up, I'm sure there's 10 books again on cricket and life, whatever. I don't
yeah,
know what they are, but someone's drawing parallels to how we think about, for example, athletics. But I'm sure somebody's writing that about gardening, right? How do we draw these parallels between these other elements in our life and how we do business and how we treat people and how we do whatever? And so, yeah, that's what I got to draw upon.
excellent. Now, your 3 businesses, can you tell us a little bit about those? How did you start the first one? How did you evolve into the second and the third? And maybe tell us a little bit about the entrances and exits to those.
Yeah, I when I was really young, I lived in Europe, and when I moved back from Europe, I started a printing company with my brother,
Mm.
in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I ended up selling him the business, and then I started an importing and exporting company because my wife is from Italy, and I had all these connections out there, and I was doing importing and exporting company. And then I got out of that and got into the mortgage space where, like I said, I became the national production manager for a fairly large mortgage company.
Hmm.
And when I heard about coaching, I exited that business and became a coach. And I've been a coach since the year 2000, so 24 years. About 8 years into it, I had a little bit of an epiphany, Ray, about the idea about how to actually create transformation in people.
Mm.
And it had to do with what we were talking about. Again, the company that I was working for, it's a wonderful company, but they were fairly technical. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it wasn't as intriguing for me in terms of, wait a minute, if we're going to actually get people to have transformation in their mind, how do we actually do that? That threw me into the field of emotional intelligence.
Mm.
And I started to take classes in the field of emotional intelligence, and then I started getting into neurobiology and neurochemistry. I'm a little bit of an odd person. I tell people probably not a day in my life goes by even today where I'm not studying something about neuroplasticity or neurochemistry or biology. I love how the human brain works, which is why in 2013 I started Rewire, which was much more about how can we help people think differently so that they can take different actions and get better results. That's sort of the genesis of the companies And I've had Rewire now since 2013. My partner and I, Jason Abel, he's in Maryland, I'm in Oregon. And we have coaches all around the country that are taking this approach of mindset and how we help people think differently, leaders, CEOs, line level executive salespeople, anybody like you said that wants to go, you know what? I don't want the same old, same old. I want to do something different, think about it differently. And if we're doing that for people, it's been awesome.
Based on what you've said about neurobiology and human behavior and helping people to think differently so they can achieve different things, I could speculate about why you decided to write about the lizard brain. But rather than speculate, maybe you can share with us what motivated you to write about the lizard brain, and why is it important?
Well, I was in a class through an organization out of San Clemente, California, and I was in a class, and the teacher was teaching on this topic of plasticity and the lizard brain, neuroplasticity, kind of how the brain works. Mm-hmm. And I literally had one of those moments. And call it an epiphany, call it a insight. I was like, wait a minute, and I just went down this journey of understanding. And just very briefly, the lizard brain is this. Think of it as a mental construct. Unlike other parts of the brain, the hippocampus, where we encode memory, the prefrontal cortex, you can link all these biological features of the human brain. The lizard brain might not be as much a biological feature as it is a construct of the mind, primarily to help us promote survival. Your brain, Ray, is there to keep you alive.
And would that be fight, flight, or freeze? Is that?
Yeah, and that's primarily from the amygdala. That's part of it.
Yes.
That's
okay.
Part of it. But there are some neuroscientists who affiliate the lizard brain with the amygdala, the fight, flight, or freeze aspect. I think it might be a little more comprehensive than that. But just very briefly, if your brain's there to keep you alive, it's what I learned and what I wrote about later was it does 4 things to keep you alive every day. It looks for familiarity. Brain loves familiarity because guess what? If it's familiar to you and you're alive, your brain's going, hey, do that again.
Okay.
And it, by the way, the second thing is it looks to be right. I want you to know that everything you think, and the moment you think it, you think you're right. We all do. Now, if you give your prefrontal cortex even a few moments, you might think, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. But in the moment, the brain's trying to be right. Maybe anthropologically, if we were wrong, we were dead. And so we carry that over. And so the third thing is your brain loves to make habits. Habits protect our survival primarily through the functionality of a lack of energy. Once you make something a habit, you don't need to think about it, just a habit. By the way, your brain's going, I don't care if it's a good habit or a bad one, just make it a habit.
Oh, okay.
Because then I don't got to think about it. And then the last thing is your brain loves to control. It loves to feel like it's in control. So familiarity, being right, habits, and control are the 4 characteristics that I write about in the book. I've spoken about them for the better part of a decade and a half. And the reason is the name of the book is Still the Lizard. This aspect of your mind, you can't kill the lizard because it's there to protect your survival. But when the lizard gets really active, you might wake up tomorrow and go, you know what I want to do? I want to go on an exercise program. I want to do this. I want to read more. I want a different relationship. Well, your lizard brain's going, yeah, that sounds cool, but no, that's different. And remember, we don't like different. We're going to resist different. Different's going to take energy. We were right before. You're alive. You're here. You're whatever. And so don't change nothing. And that, in part, describes some of the challenges that we go through in our mind. And so when you can help people uncover that, you effectively help them approach things that aren't familiar to them, that they can feel free to be wrong. Because if you're right about everything, you're not going to change. You're not even going to be. By the way, if I'm right about everything, curiosity is dead.
Wow.
Right? Why would I be curious about anything if I'm walking around right about everything? I got a million questions about you and what you do, but if I know everything and I'm always right, why would I ask and why would I care?
It would be a waste of time.
That's right. And so learning to still that part of the brain. And so when someone comes to me and says this about politics or religion or whatever it might be, I'm learning still to this day how to take myself out of it and my lizard brain that's going, no, I'm right about this, and go, wow, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Sure.
That's not just professional curiosity. That's a practice of stilling your lizard brain. And if you can do that, you can apply that practice and even in business and in life. And as you think about that, it's weird. Think about how many marriages or relationships might benefit by having the two parties learn to still their lizard brains.
Mm.
And so these are
Mm.
just concepts. Now we apply them, more to the business side of it, but I love it when someone tells me, there's this personal side of me and professional side of me. And I'm like, you only have one brain. Let me assure you, you will bring your personal side to work and you will bring your work home. I promise. Because
Mm.
we only have one brain. So,
We think we compartmentalize, but we don't.
nah, you only have one brain.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot here. My goodness, Steve, we're coming towards the end of our time together. I could ask you a whole lot more questions. I want to dig into more about the lizard brain and the curiosity question that you mentioned. Tell me more about that as a way to quiet the lizard brain. I'm asking myself, are naturally curious people, do they ask themselves that question just by nature, or is there some part of their brain, or is the lizard part of their brain just dormant or less active than it is in other people? I wonder how much of that is natural versus a learned behavior. Is curiosity learned or is it natural, I guess is what I'm asking.
I like you. You don't even know. That's the closest thing to the $50 million question that anyone's ever asked me. You're basically asking me my opinion about nature versus nurture, right? Like,
Well, yes, yeah, I
and
guess so.
everybody listening to this, it's interesting. Everybody has an opinion about that, including some really, really smart people who study it.
Yeah.
My opinion is, first of all, it would completely depend on what it is. With regard to the lizard brain, the first answer is I don't have the foggiest notion of how to answer that.
Mm.
But I suspect, and I know hey, people want to email me and get at me and challenge me. I accept the challenge because I'm not trying to be right. My
Yeah.
perception is it's more it's more nurture than nature.
Hmm.
Human beings have very, very few neural connections at birth. Are there genetic things? 100%. Look at you and
Mm-hmm.
look at me. I've
Mm-hmm.
been trying to meditate my way taller for years and it hasn't worked because there are some genetic codes. There are genetics, physiological genetics that also happen in the brain. However, when someone comes to me and goes, oh, I'm just a type A personality, that's the way I was born. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that is more learned behavior. I think we learn a lot, even from the age of 1 day. Now we can see this with our technology, how the brain, from the ages of 0 to 5, we are firing neural pathways, creating billions and billions of connections based on every single interaction that happens.
Yes.
So to me, that's important because if it were way more nature, then I wouldn't have a job. I would
Sure.
be to coach someone to be taller, right? Like it wouldn't work. But we actually have seen people grow in their curiosity because they're able to rewire how they actually think about that and still their lizard brain. You can still your lizard brain, but it's a practice and it won't come out you real easy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Practice, training, that's certainly probably a bigger factor. But like you said, do we really know? But certainly you have been able to achieve results with your business and with your clients based on the observation that you can alter that, based on the observation that nurture plays a big role.
Well, 100%. Like you've been asking, ironically, about curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
You've been curious about curiosity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that is just one simple soft skill. That's a mindset thing. I believe that I've trained myself to become more curious than I was originally. And I have worked with people who have increased that in them. So to ask curious questions, you can learn that mechanically when it starts to become part of who you are. And then I'll give you, I don't know, I'm not trying to answer the $50 million question. I'll give you one little tip. If I could say, wow, Ray, tell me a little bit more about that. And I can do that. When you begin to do that internally to yourself, if I have a thought and I think, man, I should do this, and I'm able to go, whoa, Steve, what an interesting thought. Let me explore that and not immediately deem it as right 100%. That's, to me, that's the beginning of genuine and authentic growth. That not only would you practice curiosity externally, but you'd practice it internally. And you can learn to do that. That's the whole process of metacognition. I'll come back on your show and we can do a whole show on metacognition. But it's a learnable skill. And when we do what we're able to accomplish in business and life, I mean, it's the sky's the limit. It's boundaryless. And if you don't, we become fixed. And our mind becomes set. And it's not saying bad things will happen to you, but man, more people walk around not achieving their potential because of a lack of inner curiosity and the ability to grow.
That's a brilliant place to close out, I think. Few things just in closing. What are you reading right now, or what podcasts are you listening to right now that you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
Oh, man. I am actually going back through a book written by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy, two doctors from Harvard, who in 2010 published a book called Immunity to Change. And I think the work of that book and them building those immunity maps is something that rocked me a decade ago. But you always know it's a really good book, and it's the timelessness of that work. Today, it's ever much more relevant. Actually, going back to Immunity to Change, of Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy. And I invite anybody, any leader of any organization, please, please, please read Immunity to Change. Not just read it, but apply. So that's what I'm working through right now.
Grateful for that. I think one of the hallmarks of a good book is the desire that we feel to go back to it and extract more. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a great reader from a speed perspective, because I'll read a paragraph or sometimes a sentence and I got to go sit down and think about it for like 2 weeks. Like, wait a minute. And that doesn't lend itself to finishing things, because I've had a lot of people, they love books. I've even told people that's a great book. And then I think about it. I don't remember. I just remember it being great. I just don't remember anything about it.
Yeah. You know what? I bet certain parts of it, though, have incorporated, or you have incorporated elements of a book, if you enjoyed it, into your work and into your whatever it is inside of our brains that absorbs new habits.
Yeah, and it's the difference between here's two words. I know we got to end, but the orthodoxy versus the orthopraxy. Orthodoxy is correct thinking, like, oh man, I love the thinking. Orthopraxy is how we practice it. You can love a book, you can love a thought, you can love it. If you don't live it out, it's not that it's bad, it's just maybe doesn't get its fullest usage. And so, yeah, how are we living out the things that we believe in deeply? How are we living those out?
Wonderful. And then finally, how can people get in touch with you and your team at Rewire?
We've tried to, I go out in the world, I try not to be hard to find, but, with social media the way it is and as diffused as it is, I'm pretty easy to find, certainly on LinkedIn, not that hard to find. So LinkedIn's a good way. RewireInc.com. So I had to throw Inc on there because by the time this was years ago, I was trying to get Rewire, but it was owned by an electrical company in New Jersey. I don't know if they still own it, but Inc. So go to the site, pretty easy there. The that I published are easily accessible on Amazon.
Yes.
I don't know. You can Google Steve Scanlon. I noticed there was a photographer in Boston. I've never met him, but that's his name too. But I'm not
Okay.
hard to find. So LinkedIn is a really easy way. Steve at rewireinc.com. Email me. I tell
Wonderful.
people that, like, I'm happy to speak to people and reach out to people. If there's any way that I can be helpful to you or anybody in your audience, we're just more than happy to think through things with people.
Excellent. Steve Scanlon, it has been a pleasure speaking with you here on the ROI Clear podcast. Thank you for being with us today.
It's been a real honor. Thank you for your curiosity. You're awesome.
And thank you for engaging the ROI Clear podcast. At ROI Clear, we buy multifamily apartment properties, we improve them, and we give people a great place to live. At the same time, we give investors an opportunity to enjoy capital preservation, tax advantages, and a solid return on investment. If you'd like to know more, click the link to roiclear.com down below. We look forward to speaking with you.